Hello, good evening. We are gathering here today to in another discussion from a series, Climate for Culture. My name is Małgorzata Miśniakiewicz. I'm a curator and art historian, and I'm here with our three guests who are all the way in Vienna. Schörkhuber, Franz Tišek, and Markus Hiesleitner. Welcome. So let's start this conversation by giving the floor to you. And if you could just say a few words about your practice, just to kick us off.
Hello, good evening. My name is Markus Hiesleitner. I'm in sculpture. I'm running together with Franz Tišek this artist-run space Kulturdrogerie, and nice to be in this talk this evening.
Yeah, well, my name is Schörkhuber. I'm a media artist and sound artist, and I'm also involved in several cultural initiatives. For example, Echoräume, which is a open source streaming provider in Vienna that arises during Corona, or like the Symposium in the Brunn, which is an art space in a nature protection area in Austria. So I am both working as an active artist, as an organizer and curator.
Yeah, welcome. My name is Franz Tišek. I studied also sculpture at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And 15 years ago, we started the Kulturdrogerie as a student project, and now this year we are celebrating 20th anniversary. So we are running this base, and then as a collaborative project, and we are also working on individual projects. And there is a second space we invented last year, like in the countryside, to connect rural areas and city areas.
And maybe just one add-on, because of the scenario we are in. We are sitting in the Kulturdrogerie in Vienna, and you see in the back door this site-specific installation of Thomas Hörl. We're opened just 10 days ago, and you will see in the main window outside this installation and people passing by in the public space, and we're sitting inside, and this is just the surrounding you see.
Yeah, I'm in Art Transparency Space, which is again another 18-year-old organization that started with student-organized festivals. So I think there are a lot of connections here. And coming from that, I wanted to ask you, Christine, about the work that you co-created for this year's Survival Festival. It starts with "My Nerves Are Bad Tonight" as an interpretation of a verse from T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. And it seems very fitting for the subject of our conversation, time to panic. So I wanted to ask you,
Yeah, well, it was interesting. At the beginning, I received just a short part of the whole poem recorded by Anna Clementi. So, and only then after I read the whole poem of T.C. Eliot, so I had a different approach to it. So for me, it was at the beginning, yes, I also felt this like a kind of an extract of a current situation, actually, a bit. But also like a very personal thing. When I read the whole poem, I finally got aware what Wasteland actually is, and that this is actually a huge piece of literature. I actually never was reading T.C. Eliot before because I did not like his connection to Ezra Pound, and he was not really distancing from fascism, so I was always skeptical. But I must confess that the poem really impressed me, and that I think it has a lot to say. It's a big piece of literature. So when I had my very short little piece, I was actually happy that I have this only little few words of recording where I could work on and where I could find my own interpretation. So I just created a kind of audio setting of a person in an insecure situation of being not sure anymore what to believe and what to think of, which kind of voices coming from outside or maybe coming from inside. But I also wanted to make it a bit more easier, like a bit out of this drama and very big and whole interpretation, and put a bit of beat behind it. So it could be also like this kind of slight inconvenience. It doesn't have to be a big drama. It's also this little slight inconveniences that you feel in these moments of irritation, being alone, being unsure about this wasted land outside there. Is it so wasted? Is it not? Is it me? Is it them? Well, that was my approach to the summer piece.
I think it's very fitting in terms of the psychological and emotional ambiguity we are in currently, right? Especially right now, with on the one hand we have the ecological crisis, but on the other hand there's a pandemic, and we are stuck at homes again, probably for quite some time, not working and not acting in the way we usually do. You know, being so focused on protecting the bodies that the psychological aspect of it becomes sort of secondary. And I wanted to ask, how do you all, as organizers, not only artists, feel this situation it changes your practice or changes your outlook on creating art and producing art events and culture?
Hi.
Well, we are luckily since 5 years also occupying 2 parking places during the summer months, and so with the different regulations because of the COVID-19 pandemic, so we were always somehow possible to act and to show and involve people outside. So somehow our practice wasn't changing so much. And as I told before, last year we started this countryside symposium art exhibition, and there's also like everything is outside, so there you can really take care for people, for visitors, so like there's distance, that they feel safe. What is like in small rooms inside not so easy to handle, and then it's also as an organizer it's hard to take all the responsibility, and so there are several rooms they couldn't then act personnel, they had to go virtually. And so luckily, it's like for the Kulturdrogerie, we have on one side the parking space as exhibition space. We did involved 3 artists and had 3 shows. And then during the summer, June, July, we were on the countryside.
Well, for me as an organizer, I was really affected a lot because I had a completely planned sound art festival that was planned to open on the 4th day of lockdown. So, and I already had a fully packed exhibition in a truck that was going to Graz, and then it was going back. So for me, it was really a mess, but something good came out of it. Due to this situation, we founded this streaming platform, this open source streaming platform that I mentioned before. So actually, from us, it was really possible to create something new of it. So we switched on virtual, but it was not only that we put the contributions virtually, it was more like, okay, now we are stuck to the internet, so let's work with the internet as an artistic environment. So many other contributors and organizations also dropped in, and we really created a big community of media artists that were joining in. And then this kind of worst case solution became something interesting again in itself. With my other project on the countryside, that was also actually quite practical, that we had this lot of space. So we of course, we had restrictions and everything was messy, and we needed all these lists, and not so easy. I mean, I'm also familiar with a lot of musicians, and for them, of course, this was a big disaster because everything that was going to live events and musicians that are really living from playing, it was really a disaster. So also the impossibility to plan something. All the new restrictions are usually coming not with enough time to plan, so it's too fast always. You really have to put upsides down everything from one minute to the other. So many organizers that I know, they're really struggling hard. I mean, we found solutions, we can do our stuff, but still for bigger events and for events with a lot of live musicians, I don't know how this situation should continue. There's really economic problems, of course.
For me personally, as a freelance artist, so not in the institution, just as a person, for me, first the lockdown, I couldn't do so much. The show were cancelled or just put a new date there, or I couldn't. It was a standby mode actually, and but in that time, a lot of other options came up because. The state did some programs, or Lower Austria, for example, invited me to write something about art in the public space. They try to support the Austrian artists or try to support personally artists and get with them in touch. And so before I was like working by my own on my own programs, and now people ask me, how are you, and how is your income, do you survive? And this didn't happen before, so it was something new for me. And program happened later or in another circumstance or in another form, and actually now the support of artists is different, and there is support, and the state gave artists money in advance, but just those artists who are insured as an artist. So it's not the whole group. So it's especially those that are in a financial way are insured or as an artist on paper. And these freelance artists or part artists, they have much more struggles and problems. But this shows up that a lot of things are not working anymore or wrong working, and showing the problems in culture, supporting artists, paying artists, and a lot of these thematics.
Something that follows from what you said is, on the one hand, the question of art production. How much do we have to produce? You know, where do we produce it? Where do we present it? There is this move to the digital that's, of course, happening in many spheres of life. But I wanted to ask you also, how do you see, because you mentioned working in the countrysides and doing projects in the rural areas. And I think there's quite an interesting tension also in your practices between making it, focusing so much on the internet and on the digital, and while on the other hand, bringing forth this rural aspect that's much closer to nature and rejection of the urban lifestyles.
Actually, I don't see there a gap between these things, because both belongs to modern world. As I think many of us also following this idea of Anthropocene, like the age when the human being is actually leaving its traces in the geological system, substance of the world. And that's what we do, that's what we do digital, that's what we do when we are out in the nature. I think it's really time for negotiations. And negotiations means negotiation with an ecosystem, with a real substance, material, nature, environment, animal, and other things than the human being. negotiation means also that the whole digital communication that we are doing is another layer of how we communicate and how we work with each other. And that does not exclude this negotiation with the nature environment. I think actually that's the biggest force we have those days is really to put a straight line on this and connect these two things. Because at the end of the day, digital can also relieve us from many, many climate problems. It's just a question, how do we do digital? Who has the right, who has the ownership of communication, who has the ownership of information? If you find a solution for that, I think those two issues are just really going in the same direction and the same line.
For like we are more like coming from the sculpture and starting 2005 this art space, we were like involving other students, friends, artists, and we were like concentrated inside and somehow also like in the bubble. And then like 6 years ago, we were for the first time like occupying the parking space as an exhibition space, and so we created a new audience. During the years, we also like more known like in the district. So like we opened over the years our bubble, and we also opened our possibilities and for other artists. And so outside on the parking space, they created quite big sculptures, and then was the question, okay, where to put them, just to de-install them and throw them away, and then we had this possibility, like on the countryside, to start with some art park, and there are now these art pieces created for the space here, like for the urban situation. Then they are transformed to the rural situation. There is a new interpretation, a new meaning, and also we are there inviting artists to create their site-specific works.
Zaczęliśmy też zachęcać naszych artystów do tego, żeby otwierać się, żeby działać.
There came up a dialogue of what's going on in the city, where the problematic of cars, dealing with space, environment problematics are maybe closer, or maybe just because of the city where everything is much more compressed. I give another opportunity to show art here, discuss art here, to have the bigger audience in the city, and in the countryside you have this nature, you have this other contrast, and then you put the art piece from the city, or which handles with this questions in the countryside, and this dialogue we are working with, and now we put taking things from the countryside to the end as well. So Lisa Dietrich's work in summer was to put here a small pond in the public. So these two parking lots were used for a small pond with plants and bioglitter. It was like a painting with nature, and it was just a little piece of nature with water, but the people got into it, they liked it, some didn't like it, they had problems with mosquitoes and so on, but it's to bring some piece of the nature in the city, some city in the countryside. So this kind of dialogue opens up a lot of views and dialogues and questions.
Sorry, do you think that this moving and migrating between those different landscapes and different forms of living, do you think it is more of a way of not explaining one to another, but do you think that the change of context can bring new solutions or new forms of lived-in experience? For example, what's the purpose of moving, you know, the urban works to the countryside, or vice versa?
For me, this kind of brings a lot of new experiences actually, because only when I remember the summer that I was spending a lot in this cultural space in the countryside, and I was not thinking that I would fall so deep into going into ecological research, but at the end of the day, I was just so super into figuring out what this ecosystem is, how does this work, how it is possible that all these things go together. So I was observing the plants and animals and insects. And for me, it was statistically super inspiring, and it made me like a bit more, I don't know, coming down from many expectations on the importantness of my own art, maybe, or on the meaningfulness. But on the other hand, it gave me new ideas of meaning. And coming back to the city, I see on the other hand that in the city there is actually much more awareness on ecological issues in one way, because it is more politicalized, if you can put it like this, as it is on the outskirts. Everything gets so special, and all these urban gardens, they get such a big meaning and they are so important. But if you look closer, also the city is an ecosystem. So nature is not something that is there and we are here. Nature is just what we are in. So we just change our focus on it. So for me, it makes a lot of sense in artworks to have this focus too. So it's not only, artists always say they're working with the room. Yes, okay, they do, of course, it's obvious. If you work with the room in a landscape, it means you work with nature, you work with the environment, you negotiate with another system that is not human. And this is for me super interesting. Also, I really like what you told me before about your practices in ponds and here in Drogeria. I think it's really super interesting, this aspect.
Yeah, this it brings us the possibility to bring different audience together, like the different bubbles to open, and like with the field of art, you can somehow start like to be the game changer, and like back to the parking situation when we did it for the first time. The district mayor was a conservative, and he was like parking space was something a wholly political issue, and so there were different initiatives to put some trees on, take away some parking areas, and so he wasn't willing to do so, but like we as an artist, like we were like a little bit the icebreaker, not like move directly into his politically ideology, but with pieces of art that he can also like somehow in his conservative world connect to the necessity of giving space for other possibilities. And now transforming the art pieces to the countryside, like the art park, there are people confronted with the art pieces they wouldn't see otherwise. They wouldn't get into the discourse.
Yeah, after the first year, 5 years ago, the election changed a lot. So we're in a district, the Green got in power. So the district leader is from the Green Party, and support of what we are doing got raised because it was supported by the politicians first year conservatives. We did first time this occupation and art in public space, and then the district changed, but not because of us, but just as a that people see there has to be some changes. This parking lots are using a lot of space, and we want to use the space for being outside, being on the street, being on the sidewalk, using space for the families, for the kids, and the last 5 years using this public space showed us a lot of dynamic of this rethinking of shared space and how we want to live together in another way, and not just using the public space for going from point A to B, use it as a space for living, dining outside, or just being there. And the crisis now showed us that the use of space is very important, especially when we are locked, or and this focus of our surrounding, how we're using our surrounding, got much more in focus because of this time now.
Sorry, I think the question of the space that in all of your work emerges in kind of different ways is quite interesting, because there is the space that presumes some sort of not necessarily community, but it presupposes some sort of, delineates a space of experience, like in your Christian sound pieces. I often feel there is this moment of maybe not enclosure, but there is a certain, the sound becomes a matter that delineates the body. I was wondering also with your work, Franz, that there is quite a lot of natural objects in your practice, and then there is this migration again of bodies through spaces from the natural to their cultural habitat. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit more maybe about that, about the bodily aspects of experience.
Well, beside artist, my background is also being an organic farmer. And so I grew up in countryside and then moved to the city, studied art, and went back I'm living partly in countryside, partly in the city, and I took over the farm of my parents, and so this is my main income job. And so in working with the natural material, it's for me the reference of this growing up in the countryside, and then connected with the theoretically discourse I took during my urban situation, or my urban life.
For me, actually, I think I maybe forgot what you actually asked me, but it was with embodiment, sound, and community. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, sound, as you cannot close the ears, so sound is a sense that has a lot to do with a kind of broader experience than a focused visual experience. And I like to work especially with sound, and especially also with interviews, because I like this community aspect a lot, and I like to speak about other people because I can learn something from it, and I like to work with gathering knowledge through listening to people, doing interviews with them, speaking with them, and also listening to soundscapes or landscapes. There's also this embodied moment of listening that is actually, in a way, always a very personal thing. Of course, this is different in an insulated situation or in a concert. It's two very different sides of sound art. but you're kind of echoing in yourself. And that's what I really appreciate. Somehow, I was also growing up in the countryside actually, so I did not go to. I'm not coming from an organic farm, but I'm very close to the rural situation and the agricultural culture. And for me, it was also interesting to bring that into concepts of art in Vienna. At first, to think there are like ages between, but listening is for me a way of bringing these two things together.
I'm working as an artist, as a sculptor in the ecological field. In my sculptures, I'm using plants. I'm working with processes. I'm working site-specific. I'm working with the public space. Actually, I think a lot of people in Austria growing up in the countryside because it's just one city. And so I grew up in the countryside as well, and I have an agricultural background as well. I have a degree in agriculture, so this mixture in my biography, maybe this is the reason why we run together since 15 years. The Artist Run Space, Franz and me. We have some similarities or way of doing or seeing the world, and maybe there comes this way of seeing the world in a bigger field. So this overview effect is as a blue marble. This all is connected to another thing, and so it's art, or my art is very much in this way of the connection of life, of how this all fits together. And we are not human beings that are just using what we need. We are part of it. So we are just a little thing in between, and we are very dependent on our climate, on our surrounding, and we cannot live just from the sun, and we are not doing photo as like plants using chlorophyll for getting energy. We have to produce food. We have to handle with care with the things they're giving us in our surrounding, and so this makes this relation to this field, and this relates me as a sculptor to use all this material, to use all these thematics in my art as well. And,
yeah, because there's this eternal, maybe not eternal, but the crucial question: art can be seen as a sort of surplus. So, you know, how art can be useful in critically acknowledging the ecological, you know, the sustainable, how art can be sustainable. I don't know, maybe, I mean, you all worked with that, so maybe you can comment.
So I have a little bit of problem with to make now a museum, just to make a museum more efficient in the consumption of energy. It makes it as a green museum or something like this. So it's a little bit greenwashing in culture and in art as well. So it's happening as well, and everyone is doing green art, and in a way of efficient, and it's important. So this discourse of what museums are doing, what the big international shows are doing. So some are a little bit strange and maybe kind of greenwashing, but for sure art is a very good instrumental to show things, to get discourse with this situation, and inspire people by rethinking the way of doing, but sometimes everyone wants to get in a special focus, and maybe we should think in bigger dimension, not just that how much energy is saved by an art piece. So maybe if an art piece is good enough to change the world, it's effective to use some energy for it.
Yes, I like the idea. If an artist is good enough to change the world, it can need as much energy as yeah, for me, this greenwashing is a very interesting point, actually. Maybe this in art is also about concept. So I also think that you cannot always put the energy efficiency of an artwork on its content or meaning. So maybe you need also to show something, you have a way around or to do something else. Of course, it's super interesting because like years ago, we did a festival, Autarke Klänge, Autonomous Sounds was the name, and it was about sound art that is not needing any sufficient electricity. But of course, it was not working at all, yeah. But it was super interesting, this DIY process that was going on and the way people were rethinking art in terms of just how to come to this point. I think this can be also a laboratory challenge, or this can be also like a bit of fun DIY, like an open challenge. And I agree with you that if a museum is looking on its energy balance, it's maybe doing it because of the energy cost and not because of the big ideological meaning. Something to kind of to ask, to look a bit closer on it.
Yeah, in our studio practice here, we are always trying to recycle, upcycle things, and like, because now we have already this institutional discussion, they have often just too much money that they can re-architecture their museum for shows, and then like building up after 4 months in new architectural situation and throw away the material. And well, now with the greenwashing thing, they're also rethinking these things, but actually before they were part of the problem, because like the dynamic of like the traveling of artists, or like there are so much resources they took and like wasted a lot. And so this maybe to this institutional discourse, and for us we grow somehow up with like this recycling, because as students you don't have so much resources, and then also to this site specific, like this maybe break it, fix it, upcycling.
Yeah, I completely agree that, I mean, along with the fetishization of nature somehow in art, comes the institutional pat in the back, you know, or like, yes, we deal with these subjects, that's very ecological and responsible for us. Well, doesn't bring any rethinking of the institutional model or the very idea of accumulation. What are the institutions for in that respect? I completely agree with you. And I was wondering, how do you deal with that in your space? Like, do you think you should, or you can, I don't know, abandon the institution or rethink the model entirely? Have you thought about that?
Maybe it's about the motivation. So, like a little bit the struggling, and also like not to create some assets for the market, and to orientate on different values, like to start with the room, with the people, with the surrounding, with the environment, and not to look to some Excel or like to the market. So not so much follow the money. I mean, of course, we also need money to survive, but it's a question of which focus you are on. And so also like our exhibition practice, the artists we are involving, we want them to create something new here, to work site specific, to use it as a laboratory and not just to as a gallery.
Yeah, so what you want to produce as an artist, so you want to produce values for rich people, you're producing money, or you're producing ideas reflecting our way of living, or what we are doing. And, there are a lot of possibilities in how you do this, and maybe when we talk to other people, we say maybe it should be more colorful, that a lot of small spaces, off spaces, artist point spaces are maybe giving more this different ways than one big institution which gets every month or such. Just way of doing, or to have just this international artists and selling of these ideas in a big way. So maybe it should be more colorful and again. And so this coming weekend there should be this Index Festival. This would be a weekend for small independent art spaces in Vienna. It cannot take place because of we have now a new rule here, just 6 people in one room within our suite, so we're fine. But so they had to cancel this festival. It would have been the 3rd time that it takes place, but hopefully next year. But 30, 40 spaces would have taken place, and this connection of this, differences in doing art, in producing art, and showing art, and kind of different institutions, or in a small institution and maybe more colorful way.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I would speak about more institutions or associations I'm involved with. Actually, also agree with this fact that it is more about the producing moment of producing art and producing common goods than producing goods for the art market. Anywhere, I must confess, I'm thankful that Austria still has a funding structure that allows actually undertake much more than in other countries to step it back from the really hard art part. Do you understand me? Is it okay?
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence? Like it completely jumped. I couldn't hear.
Okay. What my last sentence was that I think in Austria we have a very privileged situation, that there is a funding system that is actually really supporting efforts producing arts, not non-commercial arts, art is on the side of the art market. So that is actually a very good situation we are in many ways, and I'm really lucky that I can use this situation, because it's actually my aim. Like what I said is not producing goods for the art market, but producing good art, common art. Well, yes, and now I forgot what I also said, but maybe it was not so important. About the common structure in art production, I think this is always very interesting questions, because on one side we can speak about politics, but what you actually learn if you run an art space, if you have an association, if you work in an institution, it's actually daily politics. You learn every day how hard it is actually to have fair deals, to work together, everyone in a place, representation of everybody, diversity. And that's a very hard challenge, but it's a challenge I really like to take, because I think I'm learning also much about activism, politics, and actually about the way how we can organize with each other.
Sorry, can you repeat the last sentence? I'm guessing if I didn't hear it, the interpreter also didn't.
But did you hear it from because internet delay or microphone?
I think it was internet because it kept on jumping and.
So I would just like to introduce that for me, the culture work, in the artwork, in the station, in the institution, in the community is very interesting because it's like reflecting big politics in a small bubble. So you learn a lot about fair deals, about negotiations, about representations of everybody, about needs and different points of views. And for me, it is a very interesting field to learn about how actually politics can work in the sense of how can people live together, also through the way of how can people do arts together, because at the end it's reflecting much more than on the goods that are produced.
Working together is one aspect of it, but you know, speaking from the Polish perspective, where most of the funding is public or grant money, that's most money that's in the art sector. You have the situation that's volatile on the other end of it. It's very dependent on public funding. And then, you know, there comes this sort of self-censorship, for example, because you have to apply next year, and there are guidelines, and you have to support yourself and people you work with. So there is this logic of maybe not being as daring as one would want to. Yeah. And it is on the NGO and on the institutional level equally. Possibly, that's happening.
Yeah, that's what I meant before when I said at the moment we are again in a kind of privileged situation. We are almost in a much worse situation. If you depend on public fundings, of course, you have to. Yeah, we are not so free as we need to be.
Yeah.
But like in Austria, we had 2017, 2018 a right-wing government, and they tried to fund a little bit open scene. So there's like this, let's say, Polish light situation we experienced, and luckily they failed, and we have like the consultative with Greens. There's changing. They like with this constellation. There's support of the art scene. Can you hear me? No. Yes. And so for the actual situation, they create quite good solutions, and yeah, for the ecological, they have to struggle themselves a little bit, the Green Party, because now everything is like overwhelmed by them.
Yes, I mean that's the. I mean, I wanted to show you something, to use this because it says, I don't know if you can read it because of the camera. It says "Powiedz komuś," which is to tell someone. And I wanted to use this talk as an opportunity to tell you about something, and our people who watch us, because tomorrow the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland will decide, or is to make a decision, whether termination of pregnancy resulting from rape or the malformation of the fetus, which is still legal, might be declared illegal tomorrow. And now we are in this situation where seeking solutions feels very urgent. Trying to find alternatives seems incredibly urgent and necessary, but I feel like I'm about to panic, It feels like the root of action and the potentiality of art to actually counter some of these processes, or to think alternative, is more and more crumbled by the political situation. And it is either, it's not necessarily the political context here, but also in general, in terms of the logic of distribution that's happening in right now, and with the pandemic restrictions, that we don't know where they're going to lead us, and what sort of society do we emerge with on the other side. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the possibility of social role of art as a sort of critical tool or a tool to rethink possible alternative or possible futures.
Well, I actually would hook up on that.
Sorry, Christian, can you sit a bit closer to your mic? I got this.
Actually, I would hook up on what I said before, this doing art and producing art is also about working together, because as far as I figured out during these times of 2018, it was actually helping a lot, these collaborations between art situations, that you could buffer a bit the lack of funding through just working together, sharing resources and things like that. You're right, I think it's actually really a reason to panic. And I think we all had these situations. Now we are a bit better off than you in Poland, but I think we were all panicking in 2017. I think one of the biggest goals can be to maintain a kind of social and artistic net that is working in any way. That is, of course, producing on another level, because you cannot make art without money in general, but you still can maintain structures of art. And there's a lot of activistic power in art, and there's also a lot of things you can do in art where you can interrogate situations that are not really in a direct line connected to political based funding. So I think it's not a very good answer that I give, but it's the only I can give.
Hopefully, maybe there could be a new way of supporting art or supporting new ideas by level of the European Union, or so not this local thinking, so maybe as a new opportunity for handle the future. So the European Union is focusing on new green deals, on the way of tomorrow, and maybe art could be an important part of it, and maybe to use some of this money for this free artistical European art projects, and support free art, and to create new solutions, new ideas for the future. So it could be maybe a way of getting out of this nationalism and local problematic in surviving as an artist, especially for Eastern European artists, or so this completely different way of surviving as an artist. So hopefully there could be this new step, or not just to see the European Union as a union of economics, maybe more as a union of new world of living together, and in Europe, and building up a society, a cultural society, so a cultural union as well. Could be an option, hopefully.
As Christina and Markus said before, like the collaboration of artist run spaces in Vienna, there was also, before, to say openly, everybody was a little bit with themselves, organizing, struggling, and so on. And then upcoming the right-wing government, we like organized ourselves. Was like this collaboration, and then also like to show the solidarity, and to, even as small spaces, to get like group together, that you're like then speaking with one voice, you're like then more visible. And so maybe this using as an example that like within the art scene, solidarity, collaboration, and then maybe to have the impact on a bigger scale, and also like with our art pieces to set topics, and that maybe different focus. So like the art pieces, they can set topics, I think.
But there is this, there's another big question is the connection between artistic life and activist life. This situation where you get involved. I know several artists who are also activists or environmental activists, and then it becomes this model of self-exploitation, and it becomes this form of practice that becomes unsustainable for them for a long time in terms of psychological ramifications. So I was wondering, where do you see because you've been doing what you're doing for time, and I think there is this big question of how do you cooperate, how do you create a community, and how do you remain active and involved and engaged over many years without burnout, while being able to sustain yourself and create those networks of support.
Super good question. Well, for me personally, the biggest question was rising up when I was a lot engaged in refugee activism in 2015. And of course, it was almost impossible to sustain my artist living and my activist living in these terms. So sooner or later, I had to make decisions, and I was not really happy about them, but still, very difficult for everybody. I think there's no general answer. I mean, for me personally, it was really like that. I was very involved in refugee work, and I could almost not, I didn't have any income, and I needed to do something in art because, well, yeah, that's my profession. So I somehow found a way to balance it. Somehow. Doing both less, maybe. Very personal question, very difficult question. I think also in this case, group solidarity is a good thing. If you know you have somebody behind you and you are going in one direction, maybe there's a bit of buffer on one next to you. Maybe people can also alternate a bit in the really active or present times, or in being more in the background. Solutions can be found maybe also there.
Yeah, for me, art and activism and what we are doing here, and so it's very much connected. How we do our program, what we are doing in art, or what depends very much on what's going on, but I think it should motivate people that makes sense, you question what's going on, or to rethink our way of living, or how we use resources, or so to get in front and do some activism, maybe go on the street or Friday for Future. So this shows up how great it is to fight for something better together, and get together, and so there is coming energy, taking energy, and it's maybe the community gives you the energy and the sense of doing.
Yeah, acting in a group, I think, is a very good prevention for like burnout, or like that you give up. And like here, the activism is for like the long term. So like sometimes your activities, you think there is no impact, and like with art, it can take years that you have an impact, and then maybe it's better to handle than if we would only like fight for more sustainability, like fight for the environment, to protest on the street, and then you see there is nothing changing. And here with the space, like bring people together, and in the art production, it's somehow for the long term, and for your soul and your personalities, maybe or like for me, it's the better way, because like just if I would be just an environmental activist without the practice of art, it maybe also more depressing.
Yeah, but just as we're reaching the end of our conversation, I just wanted to ask you, weren't you tempted to just stay in the countryside? You know, you say you spent half your life there.
Well, the countryside, if you're there all year long, it's boring. So, and I now take these two parts, bring them together, and I mean the countryside is also like there's a little bit, the people are living for themselves, and in countryside it's better to hide for people. And so like my village, there are like 6,000 inhabitants. So the village is becoming a sleeping village because the next bigger city is 20 kilometers. And I'm then on my farm, which is again like 3 kilometers from the village center. So like I take a walk half an hour to the village center, and then this is just a sleeping city or village. So the culture situation, there are not so much opportunities, and it's also like everything is concentrating on the city, and so therefore we went like back, because at home I'm just like the farmer, and in the city I'm the artist, and now I'm like moving a little bit the artist to the village to create some alternative and also input for the village. Even if we have like a big monastery, and so there's like on the high culture, they have the offering program, but like contemporary art, fine art, there's like, so try to do something in the village. But now it's like the winter coming, so yeah, some winter is also there's better to have it in the city, to have more people around you.
And I think at the end of the day, the biggest difference is actually switching on Wi-Fi or not. Because also in the countryside.
Sorry, can you
switching off to Wi-Fi or switching it on or switching it off? Because as you said, the life in the countryside is not always like more community, or if you take it, I would say it's even less. And the world that is running around you doesn't change if you're in Vienna or in the countryside. So this is a decision of inner emigration, I would rather say.
Yeah, if the city doesn't fit, I go in the countryside. If the countryside doesn't fit, going in the city. So travel makes sense in that way, that to have the opportunity to have both, one time what is, one time what it. But I think and mix these things as well in the way we are doing it. Bring countryside in the city and city in the countryside is maybe exactly this that shows more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I asked that is because I think finding myself in this sort of, oh, you need to move to the forest, you know. I find myself in this, you know, fetishization of nature from perspective of a person who just visits it or looks at it or, you know, tries to research it. And I was wondering to what extent there is this dynamic with greenwashing and with the ecological art, with the sort of creating a fetish of nature as this sort of supposedly idyllic alternative that just becomes, you know, an empty, hollow image that doesn't recognize the lived-in experience of people in the rural areas. or for example, like in Poland, half of the population, or over half of the population lives in small cities and villages. And then we have this art that takes care about environment, and it's made of dirt and it turns into dirt. But then it doesn't really speak to people who deal with dirt every day, because they find it, completely ridiculous. Why would anyone care about that? So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that dynamic?
Yeah, well, I think for sure there is this, I would not say fetishism or glorification. Often it's like like Rousseau or something, like this idea of this nature, and this is our purest. Yeah, I mean, being in the nature is just basically really a lot of work. I mean, it's wonderful, but if you imagine to live like in a really very, very far from civilization, nature, it's just, yeah, you can also get a burnout there. I think it's just a lot of work. Just to get you warm in winter is a lot of work. For sure, it's like a protection field of desire, and but people living in a small village in the countryside, they are also not living in the forest. I mean, they're living in civilization. They also have like central heating and things like that. I think there is a misunderstanding of countryside living and rural living. And the countryside, you need a car for everything you do. That's what you don't need in Vienna or in a bigger city.
And maybe now with the climate crisis, there will be more artists more aware of like acting, and maybe also involving or doing researches on the countryside. So because we have like this development, I think it's all over the world, this gap between the rural or countryside and the urban situation. And so hopefully, because we're sitting all in the same boat, there will be taking care more, because as election shows, you need the people from countryside to change, like our politicians. And we had like 4 years ago this, our president, we have now from the Green Party, the former leader of the Green Party is now our president, and it was really so very narrow, and we had nearly a fascist president, and it's and luckily we have like our countryside people, then they are they are conservative, but they are it's not so bad as in other countries. Yeah, so we had lucky with them, but we have to be like, as an artist, this moderation role maybe to take over. But like as an artist, you're struggling yourself or focused on your art, but like open your mind and your view that you're not only looking for your individual art piece or art production.
Yeah, the universities are in the city, and so the possibility, the big museums are in the city, and so sometimes the countryside is forgotten, and so nothing is happened. Sometimes it's this like to bring things there as well. So this exchange maybe is a very important thing. So to get the people in the city from the countryside, and the people from the city and the countryside, so that's not two extremes, and working against each other, and living different lives. So it should mix up. And maybe, okay, if a person in the countryside is watching Facebook, and the person in the city, so they're just watching in the smartphone, so maybe it's this gap isn't in the distance, it's more in the focus. And if countryside people aren't studying because they cannot study because it's too far away, or they don't get in contact with the museum, so they have this other view. And this is maybe what we should focus on if we talk about this. And yeah, mix up people where they are, where they're coming from, the interests. And, yeah.
This is the crucial problem, or the big question, I think, is about the responsibility of art and artists. You, Franz, talked about the role of art as a moderator of the social dialogue. I personally don't really believe in that. I don't think it's art's role. But then there is the question of experimentation and thinking of possible futures. And then how do we, how can art draw possible futures if it's very, very often narrowed down and, privileged, educated, urban, it's got all those sort of privileges that shape its thinking. So having said that, I wanted to maybe just as a last final question to ask you, how do you see the social role of art or political role of art? Do you think it's something that you deal with, or you want to deal with if you're in your art, or yeah?
Well, I would say yes, of course, but on various levels. I think art doesn't always have to have immediate political message and inputs. On the opposite, I think it's also sometimes damaging art, because it can be very good, but it can be also damaging because it's narrowing down the possibilities of, as you said, experimentation and visionizing other world or an utopian idea. And also art has the possibility to create a really huge fields of impossibilities, which is fantastic on art, which I really love on art. And some of these impossibilities might also be possibilities. It's just the question that it is possible to open them up. Everything that you can think can be possible in movies, so art is thinking a lot of things. On the other hand, I also think that, I'm also skeptical about the commercial part of art, but at the end of the day, we have the fact that art is transit. So topics that are rising up in art are sooner or later in the big magazines, and are sooner or later on the streets, in the fashion. And well, concerning ecology, also if you're skeptical about greenwashing, but it's not the worst thing on earth that could happen that there is a trend on ecology. It's also not the worst thing that can happen that there is a trend on diversity, on anti-racism, and on anti-sexism. And art is rising up these topics and bringing these topics in the broader main society. Yeah, and for me personally, art is also a possibility to find out things and to do research. So I'm a political person, I'm interested in political issues. So no matter if I think it's good or not, anyway, my art is leading me to certain political topics. But sometimes I also just want to make something kind of interesting or cheerful. I think there's enough space on it.
I like this idea that maybe art is not just social, not just political. Art can have so many faces and so many things. It's so plural, and so this is, I think, the importance of art, and should not be used for just one thing. So it can handle a lot of things, and should handle a lot of things. And for me personally, it's a way of understanding what's going on, what surrounds me. Just me as person, and art is just the tool which let me rethink things, or just get in contact with my surrounding. And this is my small world, but I want to open it up to others, and not just for my bubble, and not just for a certain group of people, of educated people, of rich people. It should be for everyone and everywhere, and me as a person and dialogue to other persons. And this is this social thing in my art, for example, I'm talking about. And this is what I like very much and what's very important for me. I think this is my practice and what I'm focusing on.
Yeah, having a possibility to see things differently, have an experimentally view, and then like expressing things differently, not giving answers like in the short term, like in the short term as the art piece is giving more questions, but for the long term, as Christine said, there will be an impact, and then it became, or some things are becoming mainstream. And so this was like the point with you, like this moderation thing, that art pieces, art can move the topic. And when we look back, that a lot of, like in the history, art pieces became mainstream, or like topics became mainstream.
Is anyone would like to add anything towards the end? If not, then thank you so much. I think this is a very good point to end on this conversation. It was lovely speaking to you, talking to you, and thank you so much.
Now the microphone is.
Yeah, is he off? Because yesterday
no,
we had.
It's good. No, it's good.
Oh, it's good. Okay, because yesterday we had like. Even if I'm blurred and you're far away.